lucky time it is for him, because the first sense he experiences is smell, because he can smell her rancid breath that reminds him of rotting vegetables and gone off meat and just really horrible things like that. Hell yeah, I'm being held hostage. What a terrifying book. Hello, everyone. I am Rue, and this is my booktube channel, Rue with the Books. If you have been here before, welcome back. It's good to have you here again. And if you're new, then welcome. We do book stuff here, and I hope you have a bloody good time. Today is October 22nd, and so we are currently marching along to the end of spooky season. Halloween is almost upon us. What better time to pull a Stephen King review out of my bag of treats? In this video, I shall be talking about one of his more famous novels, that being Misery. Before I get into it, be sure to press that like button down below to help out with the algorithm. It is a group effort, so any support is really appreciated. If you like books, book content, or booktube, take a second to press that subscribe button down below as well. I upload at least twice a week, so I would love to hang out in your subscription feed and give you some content to watch. And since the weather is getting chilly, leaves are starting to fall off the trees, be sure to warm up, get comfy, and grab a nice beverage. I have coffee here. Because we do cozy things here, and what better way to celebrate another Rue with the Books upload than grabbing your favorite beverage. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the review. So, in the aftermath of a devastating car crash, Paul Sheldon, famous author of the Misery Chastain series, wakes up in unfamiliar surroundings without the ability to walk. The first thing he sees when he regains consciousness, albeit briefly, is Annie Wilkes, his #1 fan. And what a lucky time it is for him, because the first sense he experiences is smell, because he can smell her rancid breath that reminds him of rotting vegetables and gone off meat and just really horrible things like that. Now, waking up under the care of your #1 fan might sound like quite a lucky break considering the circumstances. You're there with someone that loves your work, has financially supported you, and has an incentive to keep you alive, so you can write more books. Well, it might have been a lucky break if it wasn't Annie Wilkes. When you're in extreme pain, recovering from a devastating car crash, you certainly don't want to be under the heel of a psychopath with violent and sadistic tendencies. And that's the gist of the story. Paul Sheldon has no means of escape. He is locked in a room with nothing but his thoughts. Eventually, he is given a typewriter and forced to write a new Misery story by Annie Wilkes. Despite having just finished his work on the series forever. So he has to write himself out of a hole and make sure that the way that the story goes pleases Annie, because nobody likes an upset or angry Annie Wilkes, which Paul is likely to find out over the course of the story. There are only really two characters in this book, apart from the ones mentioned in his stories. That is, Paul Sheldon and Annie Wilkes. It's nice and simple. We have a protagonist and we have an antagonist. Let's start with our protagonist, Paul. And up until he finds himself under the care of Annie Wilkes, he has lived a pretty good life. He's financially stable, he's able to afford vices such as alcohol and cigarettes, and partake in various acts of debauchery that someone with, a lot of wealth can do. He has lived a fairly trouble-free life, and I mean, isn't that what we all want? To be able to coast, do what you want to do and be rewarded for it. However, when he does find himself in Annie's house, he has to show his character, because he is in such a horrible, terrifying, zero hope type of situation. He has a really, really good attitude towards the situation. Obviously, not in like a hell yeah, I'm being held hostage kind of way, but he does show that he's incredibly capable of adapting to situations and overcoming obstacles. Over the course of the story, he shows that he has incredibly good emotional intelligence. He tries to read Annie like a character in a book. For most people, that probably would work, but considering how unpredictable and emotionally unstable Annie is, he has to play it by ear sometimes. With his ability to adapt to the situation, he tries different strategies with Annie, such as buttering her up, or using threats, or even being sneaky if the situation allows. And I've already said a few things, but I haven't gotten to the best part of his character. That is his incredibly captivating character voice. I have already mentioned in the Pet Cemetery that Lois's character voice is great, incredibly engaging, but Paul's character voice, a whole nother level. The majority of the book is from his POV, and I was so engaged while reading his character that I would constantly lose track of time while reading the book. He shows that he is witty, he does silly things like run sports radio broadcasts as analogies to his life at the time. He shows desperation, but also perseverance and an ability to plan. There is so much going on in his internal monologue to unpack that it's just incredibly chef's kiss. Paul Sheldon, hands down, has got to be my favorite Stephen King protagonist that I have read so far. Now, to talk about the antagonist, and that is in this book, as I've already mentioned, Annie Wilkes. To put it lightly, she is a retired nurse, so she has a lot of free time, and a lot of free time involves being able to care for Paul Sheldon, cook him food, bring him medicine, use various types of tools to do things. Wink, wink. She shows that she is very clever, cunning, and calculating. There are some situations in the book where she has to think quickly to come out on top, and she certainly does. She's painted to be a real Goliath type character, that is from like David and Goliath as a comparison, unstoppable and brutish. Annie Wilkes is an incredibly interesting character. She seems to have some form of bipolar disorder, swinging like a pendulum between loving and caring to violent and sadistic and psychopathic. When Annie Wilkes walks through the door to spend time with Paul, you never know what he is going to get. At certain moments in the book, she absolutely steals the spotlight from Paul, which is saying a lot considering all the things I've already said about how much I love Paul's character. The reason I was so excited to read this book is because I think psychological horror is one of the top types of horror. I hadn't really actually read one before reading Misery, so I was anticipating picking it up. The reason I think it's one of the top horror subgenres is because the human psyche is an incredibly hard thing to read. Despite how well you know someone, it's impossible to anticipate all of their actions. This unpredictability is what makes humans so terrifying and great, things to focus on in a horror story, to have humans be the villains. For every Gandhi, there is a Ted Bundy or a John Wayne Gacy. The reason I was so excited to read this book is because I think psychological horror is one of the top types of horror. I hadn't really actually read one before reading Misery, so I was anticipating picking it up. The reason I think it's one of the top horror subgenres is because the human psyche is an incredibly hard thing to read. Despite how well you know someone, it's impossible to anticipate all of their actions. This unpredictability is what makes humans so terrifying and great, you know, things to focus on in a horror story, to have humans be the villains. For every Gandhi, there is a Ted Bundy or a John Wayne Gacy. Where I'm going with this is that putting yourself in Paul Sheldon's shoes and having to gauge which side of the pendulum your captor, your tormentor, your savior, your nurse is currently on, well, it's terrifying, but also just so thrilling. As I was reading this book, I felt genuinely anxious and so uneasy at times. And that's what horror is for, eh? Feeling that feeling of your heart tightening in your chest or your stomach dropping. These things that Paul goes through are so incredibly messed up. So many moments in this book are actually bone chilling. Aside from the psychological aspect, there is body horror, acts of violence, cruelty, there is chaos. There are so many adrenaline fueled moments in this book just ready to send chills down your spine. What a terrifying book! So, this little section is about things that I feel about a book. I like to talk about things that I like, things that I dislike, about a book outside of some well defined structure, such as things like characters, plot, world building, prose, action, etc. I thought that the pacing of this book was really good. Not in terms of the plot moving like super quickly or anything like that, but the pace at which those wicked moments came. Horror is frequently a genre that is kind of associated with slow burns, where you get to intimately become close with a set of characters or a place or some kind of supernatural force or just a set of villains before the scary, thrilling, blood pumping moments come. I really appreciated that this book gave me those "oh what the hell" moments sooner rather than later, defying the typical pacing issues of the horror genre. It's kind of the opposite to other Stephen King books like The Shining. I think what makes this story unique is how claustrophobic it is. The entire story is set in one house with only two characters. You get to intimately become acquainted with the rooms, the things that make the house special, as well as the two characters present in the story. I really like when characters are well fleshed out in a story, and this book certainly gave me that. I enjoyed feeling trapped in this place alongside Paul Sheldon, and I was glad that I wasn't in his shoes experiencing what he was. I got to, be the outside perspective here, the person looking in. I was feeling the fear alongside him. The main aspect of this book that I didn't care about and even rubbed me up the wrong way was the story that Paul Sheldon was writing. I didn't mind when Paul was talking about what to do with the story or talking about writer's tricks and stuff like that. But when King actually gave me chapters from his book, my immersion just immediately fell out of the window. It's not like an incredibly major part of the book, but it was long enough that I started feeling bored. I didn't want to miss anything important in the actual Stephen King book, that I felt too scared to jump to the end of the chapter and skip reading the Paul Sheldon book, and that did hurt my enjoyment just a little bit. So, let's get to the conclusion. Misery by Stephen King is an incredible, character driven story about an author and his number one fan who has kidnapped him after a car crash. This book really leans into the psychology aspects, which I was hoping for, by making Paul Sheldon study Annie Wilkes' unpredictable character and adapting on the fly to deal with her moods, and also giving a really good, solid reflection of the emotions he's feeling at any given time, which, it was kind of like a cat and mouse game, a clash of wills and emotions. It was really, really well done, and I really enjoyed that part. The horror aspect was fantastic, with some really gritty, terrifying, sadistic, and gruesome moments. This book has everything that you want about a horror book, minus like the supernatural elements, if that's what you're into. The pacing of both the plot and the horror is just right, allowing a deep immersion into the mind of Paul Sheldon and Annie Wilkes. If you're a character-focused reader looking for a fright, this book could be right up your alley. The only thing that I didn't like was Stephen King making me read Paul Sheldon's work. It didn't interest me and it pulled me out of the immersion. It wasn't a massive proportion of the book, but enough to start boring me. So, considering all of the things that I have said, the good and the bad, I have got to rate it 4.5 stars out of 5. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have made it this far, I hope that a cute cat walks up to you today and lets you pet it. I'd appreciate it if you press that subscribe button. I do my best to be consistent and upload a couple times a week. Let me do you the favor of giving you content straight into your feed. I'll be uploading a review of Monsters and Mainframe soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. It will wrap up the last of my spooky season reviews, but fret not, I have a couple more videos planned for before Halloween in line with the spooky Halloweeny stuff. Anyway, I hope that you have a pleasant rest of your day, and until next time, Rue out.